Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am so excited to officially kick off episode 1 of our second season of HR at the Table. For those of you who have been following along with this journey, or for those of you who are new here, hello and welcome. It is wonderful to have you here today. Now, we started HR at the Table back in January of 2021, and we did this in response to seeing these HR and talent acquisition professionals claiming and earning their seat at the executive table as organizations started to look to them to guide them through the craziness of the pandemic. So, since we have talked with leaders from IBM, MarketCast, the NFL, MSI, and now Stanley Black Decker. So the goal of these conversations really is to talk about relevant and timely discussions that you're talking about in your day-to-day or experiencing in your day-to-day, and hopefully providing some insight into what your organization can implement to sustain and grow and figure out what other organizations are doing as well. So if you're interested in listening to any of these previous conversations, feel free to check them out at verifiedfirst.com. Our team also does an amazing job at recapping the event or doing a deep dive into the event. So make sure to check out the blog page while you're there. Now, those webinars that I talked about, those are available for Sherman HRCI credit, and today's discussion is also available for Sherman HRCI credit. So if you're interested in snagging that credit today, because we know you love that, stick around till the end and I will let you know how you can redeem that. Now, really, the point of today is we want to make sure you get the most meaning out of today's discussion. So please feel free to ask those questions in the chat function, and I will try and pose as many as I can to our wonderful guest speaker here today. I also want to give a big shout out to iCIMS, our sponsor for this episode of HR at the Table. Today, we are talking about the war for talent. And the talent market has been very unique, to say the least, over the last year. So our goal is to talk specifically about those small businesses, employee sizes from anywhere from 1 to 1,000. So the goal is figuring out how we can help them beat those larger organizations, which is why we're talking about David versus Goliath. So for those of you who are unfamiliar of the story of David versus Goliath, David is a seemingly ordinary boy who is able to take down a giant, Goliath, who was taunting the armies of Israel, and he does so with a single stone. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, and how those small organizations who are the backbone of the United States can find that stone and figure out their potential to compete for talent against some of the largest brands. And we have the perfect person here today to answer that question. I am truly honored to introduce our guest speaker, the Chief Talent Officer of Stanley Black Decker, Mr. Minh Hua. Minh, how's it going today? How are you doing?
Doing very well, and I'm very happy to be here. Love talking to your audience and your community. Thank you.
Well, it is lovely to have you here today. You've worked for organizations like Amazon Web Services, General Electric, JP Morgan Chase, and now Stanley Black Decker. So can you talk a little bit more about your experience and what it is that you do at Stanley Black Decker?
Sure, my nominal title is Chief Talent Officer, but basically my mission is to help people and teams succeed. And my team and I on the talent and recruiting side, we want to hire the best talent, bring them in, give them a great experience, develop the talent, and for our shareholders and for the business, have the right talent ready at the right time for the business needs. So I'll boil up to help people and teams be successful.
I love that. And that's so important, honestly, because you talked about the great experience, and that is exactly what candidates are looking for in today's market. Now, it is wonderful to have you here. I know we're going to have an amazing, insightful, and thoughtful conversation. So I'm really looking forward to get into today's topic. Now, I want to go ahead and introduce myself as well. My name is Brianna Rosenkranz, and I am a partner marketing manager here at Verified First. And I'm also completely elated to announce that I am the 2022 season host of HR at the Table. So I have the privilege of interviewing wonderful leaders like Mr. Minh Hua here. And I'd love if you could go ahead and follow along with this journey. If you're interested in today's conversation, please look out for the HR at the Table episodes we have coming up, because the goal is we're being an educational resource to help you in your day-to-day. Now, on that note, let's go ahead and get into today's topic. So before we talk about David versus Goliath specifically, I think it's important we talk about what is going on in the talent market. The pandemic has been absolutely, changing to the workforce, and work has changed forever because of what has happened. So, Min, if you could go ahead and take a moment and talk about what has happened in the last 2 years, the last 6 months that has impacted the talent market and how that's affecting recruitment and retention.
Yeah. So, Brianna, I think the last 2 years can be described with 3 words: whiskey, tango, foxtrot. Those are the 3 words. We've already lost 5.5 million lives due to the pandemic. Now, to put that number into perspective, we lost 800,000 during the American Civil War. The war in Vietnam, all sides lost 2.4 million. The 100 Years' War in Western Europe, you remember that from your history books, lost 2.8 million people. We lost 5.5 million in about 2 years. I wanted to start with empathy for those who lost loved ones and maybe lost their job or maybe are struggling with mental health right now. On the business front, it has been a series of whiplashes. For example, the US gross domestic product, basically a measure of economic activity, typically ranges between -2% and +4%. That's kind of the normal range. In the second quarter of 2020, GDP was -31%. I've never seen that before. Not that long ago, in early 2020, CEOs and small business owners were worried about solvency. Will their company survive? And then 3 months later, GDP went up 33%. -31 to +33 in the span of 6 months. That's a whiplash. With knowledge workers, we saw a small uptick in layoffs and then a surge in hiring that has been absolutely relentless. With hourly workers, we saw a devastating loss of jobs. Retail workers can't really work from home. That was followed by a surge in hiring and the fastest rate of wage growth in recent memory. Recruiters are tired, Brianna. The workforce is anxious. There are structural things like childcare and labor pricing that's still looking to resolve itself. But that's kind of where we've come from so far.
Yeah, exactly. The pandemic has had so many unforeseen challenges when it comes to not only individual health, but organizational health as well. And I think that's so important because especially right now, as we have mixed remote work and, business and, having that, where work is in the home now, the mental health also plays into an organization as well. So I think it's, important for the aspect of making sure you're taking care of your employees. But then also, we actually had an interview with MSI, the VP of HR, Chris Cornine, and he was talking about how people in work in tandem with each other. So they feed into each other. When you take care of your people, they take care of your organization. But the pandemic has caused some challenges that we still don't even recognize exist yet. So, on that note, I'm curious, Min, what do you see or what do you anticipate the new trends will be in 2022 and how that's going to impact the talent market as well?
Yeah, good question, Brianna. So I have a minority opinion here, but it's what I believe. I believe we are at or near the peak of this red hot talent market. The media isn't talking much about it yet. They're not talking about the talent market cooling off. So let me just take a few minutes to share with you what I'm seeing. First is monetary policy. The Federal Reserve has said it will raise rates and reduce its bond purchases. There's not a guessing game here. It's going to happen. Most Fed watchers are predicting 3 to 4 rate hikes this year. I'm 45 years old and I just bought my first home because I saw interest rates going up. So I went ahead and seized the moment. Monetary policy matters because all of the following will start to cool off. Probably in this order. the stock market, housing, venture capital funding, hiring, inflation. We are already seeing it in the stock market. It's dropping as we speak. When I checked about an hour ago, the Dow was down 600 points. Second, I think most of our audience have heard about job postings at record levels. For example, in November, the US had 10.5 million job vacancies. But what is not being talked about is that the job vacancies were slightly lower month over month. If you look at job vacancies and the quit rates on a line graph, it looks like it's having a difficult time pushing higher. The third factor is something everyone seems to be ignoring, and that's the learning curve. People, especially entrepreneurs, will learn to do more with less. For example, I was visiting a fast food restaurant in Seattle, and I noticed they kept the dining room closed because they were doing plenty of business through the drive-thru. The story you hear is about labor shortage, which could be true, but the story I see is about operating margins. Another example, I was at a Sam's warehouse in Atlanta last week and saw a big self-driving machine going up and down the aisle, mopping the floor. There was no human beings needed. Did it bother the shoppers? Not at all. The longer we stay in this labor environment, the more business leaders will learn how to live with it. So why does this matter to your viewers? If you know you want to change your job, but you're just waiting for whatever reason, my advice is to do it soon. You may not see such a red hot market again for a long, long time. This is the same advice I've given to my family members and friends. If you're an HR executive, I would say start to slowly shift the narrative of your strategy. Shift the rationale for your people investments away from, hey, it's a hot market. Shift it more towards quality of talent, team productivity, and business continuity. It's a harder story to tell, but you'll need to do it soon.
Yeah, those are all fantastic points. And I think that that is so important to recognize in, figuring out how to reassess that strategy as well as we continue to move forward with, the changing strategies in talent acquisition. Now, you talked a little bit about, things that have to do with the economy. So Forbes actually categorized the talent acquisition and HR professional role as being sellers rather than buyers. So at this moment in time, we are definitely in a candidates market. So with the changing talent market, Minh, what have you experienced in how the role of HR and talent acquisition professionals have changed or evolved with this?
Yeah, great question. That's interesting. For most of my career, I've thought of myself as the buyer of talent, but I think they're right. To be successful today, recruiters have to sell mission, a culture, and a human experience. People want to do something meaningful and find joy from their work. The point here is not that money no longer matters. In a red hot talent market, job seekers can replicate that offer you're giving them. So throwing money at it isn't a consistent way to win. The most sought after talent, again, can get multiple offers. So they want to know about mission, culture, and the human experience. And that's definitely shaped, as your question alludes to, that's definitely shaped the role of TA professionals. Back in the day, recruiters were evaluators of talent and gatekeepers. Recruiters still do that, but today I'm seeing more sales techniques. For example, I'm seeing recruiters use more demand gen tools that blast seemingly customized emails to thousands of people at one time. Another example, at Google Cloud, the recruiters are writing creative subject headers that you typically see in cold calling. Whether that diminishes their brand, I don't know. Across companies, I'm seeing a real spiritual difference in how jobs are described. Compare a job posting today to one in the year 2000, and it feels more like creative writing than assessment writing. The nature of the TA job has changed quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you brought up the mission, culture, and then the employee experience as well. We had a conversation with an organization called Prestige Care back in April of last year, and we talked all about brand and how that connects to the employee experience and, what exactly it is that your brand offers, but not only what it offers, what mission can the people working for your organization can connect to. And I don't know the study off the top of my head right now, but, there's actually reports saying that individuals who are currently seeking jobs, one of the biggest things they're looking for is purpose and reason in their day-to-day. And sometimes when an organization is able to create that positive workplace culture, they're willing to forgo the things that you're talking about, the financial compensation for a job that they actually love and enjoy working with. So love that you brought that up. I think that that is so crucial as we head into the next few years of talent acquisition, is really honing on that mission and vision, and how you can get the buy-in from not only your employees but your leaders as well, to promote that type of culture in an organization. Now, you also, so when we're talking about how it is a candidates market soon, do you think that there's anything that might happen that will shift us from being employers being sellers to becoming buyers again?
I think so. The economy is a cycle. I think the weight will shift, but I think there's a secular shift or a structural change that employees now have more power than they've ever had. And they'll start to lose some as the economy, goes in reverse. But I don't think they're going to lose all of it. I think, for example, virtual work, there will always be enough employers that will offer it, that encourages another tranche of employees to do it. So yes, it'll shift back and forth, but I think the employees have taken a step forward that won't go fully in reverse.
Right. So, Minh, the last time we talked, you actually talked about how the war for talent is over and talent has won. Can you talk a little bit more about that quote?
Yeah, so I borrowed that quote from a friend of mine in Atlanta. So it's not one I coined, but basically, the war for talent means the war for talent is over. The talent is won. Means we need that skill set. We need that experience more than they need my job. And so they've won. What can I do to talk to the candidates as an equal, talk to the candidates as a full human being, and convince them to join the mission, the culture, and this experience here? That's kind of what it means. The war for talent between employers is still alive and strong, but between employer and talent, the talent has won.
Right. Yeah. With that, so as we head into the next conversation here, I want to kind of understand the audience and figure out what it is that is part of their HR and talent acquisition wish list. So we've got our poll question here, and I would love for your participation in this, because as we go into this conversation, we recognize the various types of resources that are available for these small organizations versus these large Goliath-like organizations. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll question really quickly. Looks like my computer is loading, but Minh, with your insight, what would you say should be a part of someone's HR and talent acquisition wish list?
Oh, interesting question. I think, and if I was a recruiter, and I kind of am, right? As a recruiter, I would want from my company the freedom to have an authentic conversation and the ability to accommodate individual needs. That's how I'm going to win.
Yeah, and I think that's something so important, especially as the need for candidates, requesting a personalized experience, and being able to have those recruiters be authentic and open and transparent in those conversations can really be the key element in winning over the talent compared to, someone else at a different organization. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll here, and then we can go ahead and resume into the next part of the conversation, which specifically has to do with our topic of David versus Goliath. So, we've talked about the talent market, but I want to get a little bit deeper here. And Minh, can you describe what the competitive landscape looks like between those small organizations and those large organizations?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I get passionate about this because small and medium-sized businesses matter a lot. Globally, they're responsible for 60 to 70% of employment, In developed economies, small to medium-sized businesses drive 55% of GDP. They are the economy. The Goliaths, big companies with big brands and big pocketbooks, have size as an advantage, but Goliaths have two distinct disadvantages. First, lots of people do not want to work for a giant company. A friend of mine recently joined a large tech company as a recruiter, and she says to me, I didn't get to talk to my manager until maybe the second week. I only see him once a week if I'm lucky, and then I had to schedule time with him in advance. My manager has over 20 direct reports. And then she says at the end, you definitely feel like a number that needs to get out of the way. She said she'll never join another big company. So second, a large company like Walmart needs to hire hundreds or thousands of people for any given job. If you're a smaller company competing against a large one, know that math is on your side. You don't have to win 50% of the battles or even 20%. Focus on the talent that fits your culture and leave the rest to Goliaths like Apple, Volkswagen, and FedEx. Now, let's talk about the Davids, the small companies that are not as well known and may not have as deep pockets. I would encourage smaller companies, small to medium-sized companies, to use the perceived weakness to their advantage. Being small can be great. In a small company, a new employee has 1 to 2 degrees of separation from the CEO. They have access to real decision makers every day. There's less bureaucracy, fewer people to talk to get something done. That's powerful when a top talent wants to hear about mission, culture, and experience. So if you're in a small to medium-sized business, in which I think most of the audience is, run your recruiting organization like a platoon of snipers, not an infantry battalion. Move fast, get to know the person, pick off the right talent for your team.
I love that you brought up the distance to leadership, because that is actually something that is a key driver for candidates in having that access to leadership. You know, in my organization specifically, I have a one-on-one with the director of marketing every single week. And when I was onboarded, I met him, I believe, on my first day, and he was saying, you know, he appreciates me as a person and as an employee. So he was like, I hope one day that maybe you'll invite me to your wedding. You know, I hope one day that you see that you can also be a mother and an employee. And we had that conversation about how I am more than just a cog in the machine. You know, they see at our company, at least, you know, everyone as a whole person. So I think the distance to leadership is so important, especially because that's where you can find that talent that, you know, can rise above, and the leadership has that direct access to their employees to figure out what exactly is happening in the day-to-day of the organization, and, you know, that continuous learning improvement. So
And Brianna, I'm hoping to get an invitation to your wedding as well. So now that you put that out there. But no, I see it come through in how you work, and you're doing a fantastic job. And your company, because it's small, you know everyone, and you've done a great job. They said, hey, Brianna, you want to host, you get to host the season. So here we are.
That's exactly right. And I'm so blessed to be sitting here today. I just love the conversations that we're having. So that's true. You know, in a smaller organization, you do have the opportunity to be seen more and to excel. I think one thing that's important in that conversation, though, is that sometimes in smaller organizations, it might not always be clear what that career development path looks like. So how is that, you know, do you have any insight on how that might differ between these small and large organizations?
Yeah, so larger organizations, especially the ones that have been around for many decades, typically have career paths, job families, very structured things. For someone who wants that structure and clarity, that's very comforting. Smaller companies can do better, and you're a great example, Brianna. They can give you all that you can take. If you're hungry to learn and you're hungry to develop and accelerate your career, they can give you all of it and then some. We're in a larger company, not all of them, but in some larger companies, you kind of stay in your swim lane, and it's a little bit taboo to get out of your swim lane. In a small company, they'll give you all that you can handle. So that's how I think about career paths. And plus, smaller companies, you don't really need to hire talent that wants that structure. You want to hire people that says, I want to do everything that I can possibly can because I just want to learn. And so that's a good match.
Yeah. And that's another benefit of the smaller organizations as well, is that I was explaining to you earlier what my role is, and I said it's kind of a mixed bag, because when you work in a smaller organization, you do have the ability to kind of dabble in a few different types of, processes and practices that help strengthen you as an individual and really understand the elements of how the business operates, which knowing your business is also super key as well, especially for HR professionals when it comes to recruitment and retention. So on that note, I want to go ahead and switch over to talk a little bit more about those recruitment and retention methods in the employee lifecycle. We know that recruitment and retention feed into each other. They work in tandem with each other. And, in order to have a successful recruitment initiative, you need to have a successful retention initiative as well. So when we're looking at these larger organizations, what is it that attracts candidates to these types of positions?
Yeah, great question. So here's the cycle graph. A lot of early career talent wants the big box training and brand on their resume. They don't know what they don't know, and they don't really know what bureaucracy feels like yet. Some of the more experienced job seekers like the structure and predictability of a larger ecosystem. A lot of those, another psychographic, a lot of those who have lost their jobs when a startup failed, they tend to seek the safety of a big company. Now, all of that is totally understandable. If you're a smaller or medium-sized business, you want a different psychographic profile. I don't necessarily think you're competing against the same human being. You probably like self-starters who need to stay in motion, get things done quickly, and improvise a lot. They tend to have an irreverence for hierarchy. That's a different type of talent you're going after. So my suggestion is go after those candidates with an authentic story about culture, mission, and human experience. Let the candidates meet your executives and customers. If true, tell the story of how they can get a bigger job at your company and how they have more influence to make a difference. So tell that story and go after the right psychographic.
Right. I think telling the story is so important. I've heard of organizations in the past, and specifically here in Boise, where I am located today, Boise, Idaho. We have experienced many individuals moving from out of state here, growing the economy, still maintaining some of the jobs that they've had, working in those remote positions. And some of those organizations who are not able to offer remote work, instead, people have to come in here, but they're still dealing with Idaho wages. I think we're at $7.25 minimum wage or so. And unfortunately, they might bump it to $8 an hour, $8.25 an hour, And so those organizations are struggling when organizations like Amazon come in and they can pay $15 an hour. So what exactly would you say to those organizations who are, struggling to compete for that talent? It's two different types of job opportunities, but that pay is the kind of main feature for wanting to choose one over the other.
Yeah, listen, it's capitalism at its best. In the media, you kind of get the sense that Amazon coming in or Walmart coming in before Amazon and raising wages is a bad thing. But why is that a bad thing? Why are frontline workers getting finally an accelerated wage increase a bad thing? And so I think it's capitalism at its best. For the small and medium-sized businesses, see it as an opportunity to lean out your business, to make sure you've got the right business model, operation efficiencies to compete. And I think, and then what happens is that you kind of get better, happier talent. So you can get over that kind of initial hump of, okay, how do we afford to raise our wages? It looks good on the other side of that.
Right. And I think that's something that many small organizations are still trying to figure out, and how they're, able to do that and compete on that level. I do want to remind the audience that, please feel free to ask any questions today. I'm monitoring the chat, so if you have anything you want to bring up to Mr. Minh Hua here, we can go ahead and discuss those as well. So make sure to add those questions. But, going back into that topic here, what are the main differences that you've seen in how those Davids versus those Goliaths recruit and retain talent?
Yeah, good question. So the Goliaths are creating more of an assembly line approach, hiring thousands at a time, measuring productivity of the recruiters to the decimal point. The smart Goliaths are starting to break up that assembly line and act small. The unsuccessful small to medium-sized businesses are trying to compete against the Goliaths on their turf, like big companies. The successful small companies are paying market pricing for talent, but then closing the deal with a personal touch. You just have to match or get kind of in the zip code of that pricing and then close the deal with that emotional, personal touch. Again, that's the mission, the culture, the human experience.
Yeah, and that is absolutely key here. You know, we've talked about the upper hand that both sizes of organizations are able to have. So when it comes to small organizations specifically, what practices do you recommend to leverage those upper hands to their benefit?
Yeah, great question. I think social bonding is an area small companies can compete and win on every day. Humans want to belong to community, and when that happens, they tend to stay longer. Okay. In the war, and I'll put it this way: in the war for talent, Brianna, belonging is a competitive advantage. Here's the simplest way I can say it. Brianna, when I feel I belong here, it will take you a whole lot more money or a whole bigger job to make me want to leave. That's how powerful belonging is. And belonging starts with inclusion and social bonding. Social bonding, again, is a place small businesses can win every day. So, Brianna, you ever meet someone from Sweden, Malaysia, or Colombia?
I don't think so.
Well, if you do, they're so proud of where they're from. Go to a football game, and the fans from the smaller countries are the most passionate, at least relative to their win-loss record. Small helps bonding, and then you add a little success, you get a big spark. So I think the small companies definitely have competitive advantage. They just need to use it.
Yeah, you know, we actually did a webinar where we're talking about the trends for 2022. And one of the speakers was talking about how one big reason that, you know, employees were leaving their jobs were because their friends also left and their friends created that sense of belonging. So I think that's important as well, you know, recognizing that, you know, sometimes it's not always about work. You know, sometimes it's about creating those relationships and those bonds between employees to you know, feel empowered and cared for in their organization.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, GE in the back half of the 20th century was considered the greatest company in the world and the most successful. And this was the 20th century. And the secret sauce was they paid at market. They didn't pay higher than market. But what they did, they invested a lot in training and invested a lot in bringing people together, happy hours, travel. And when you worked at GE, as I kind of grew up in GE, you have so many friends from there, and it was so hard to leave. I've had so many people leave GE very sad because they were leaving a place they felt they belonged.
Yeah, no, that absolutely matters. You know, I think that's something that as we continue to progress in the workforce and everything, you know, I kind of mentioned the cog in the machine, you know, where you might have those managers who are very stringent on being productive all day, every day. But I think making time for your team is definitely something super special. You know, we had a meeting, we called it the Fungi Awards, like the Dundee Awards from the office, and it was an initiative that me and one of my coworkers did to provide recognition to everyone on our team to make sure that they felt seen and heard for all the really valuable things we've done in the last year. So that is absolutely a huge decision factor there.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it looks like we have quite a few questions from the chat here. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at you know, what exactly people are asking. So this goes back into our conversation with those smaller businesses being able to compete financially for certain types of talent. So this individual wants to know how this can be done if they're operating with a flattened model. Are you familiar with that?
I'm sorry, what was the word?
A flattened model?
Like flat org?
That is a good question. I'm not entirely sure. And if there's any questions we don't quite, we're not able to answer today, we'll definitely, please email us as well.
If the person who asked is referring to a flat org, what I think he or she is alluding to is that there aren't many manager roles because it's a flat org. I see that as an advantage. Yes, you'll lose some candidates who just want to be a manager, but most of the people that you hire, which is, you have more non-managers than managers, want a flat org. They want to be closer to the decision maker and not way down in the org chart. So I see that as a net advantage.
Yeah, awesome. And thanks, Brooke, for that question here. The next question that we have here. So we were talking about the employer's seller's market potentially shifting to a buyer's market. So this individual wants to know if there is a certain timeline you expect to see for that. And also, they're bringing up average sign-on bonuses as well. So Leslie, thank you for that question. Minh, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure, timeline. And what was the question on sign-on bonuses?
What do you see as an average sign-on bonus?
Oh, great question. So on timeline, listen, no one can predict the economy. It's just rapidly moving. I think we're at or near the peak. I don't think we're gonna dip next month. If I had to take a guess, but this isn't really a prediction, if I had to take a guess, by the back half of this year, everyone will see, and the media will start talking about the talent market cooling off. And when the media talks about it, it cools off faster because it gets into the psychology of everyone, and everyone comes out of the sidelines. And then that equilibrium with job postings and available talent starts to work itself out. So if I had to take a guess, we'll feel it and we'll hear the media talk about it by summer, back half of this year, when quantitatively we'll see unemployment at, let's call it 5%, 6%, I don't know. No one really knows. On sign-on bonus, it depends on the job and the industry. I've seen it range from $3,000 to $30,000. So it really depends. But your comp professional should have the benchmarking data. If not, reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to help you out.
Awesome. Thanks for that insight, Minh. Now, I want to jump back into our topic today. So SHRM recently did a study, the Recruiter Nation survey, and this consists of over 800 US recruiting professionals, and they identified that agility is the most important factor in recruitment and retention, no matter the business size. So aside from agility, what are those elements that encompass a good recruitment strategy for those small businesses?
Yeah, I think it's listening and being very informal. And so stop with the form letters. Stop playing it safe. The best way to approach a candidate is to think back when you were in elementary school. I don't know if it was Idaho for you, Brianna. But back in school, you see someone sitting at a lunch table and you want to join them. What do you do? What do you say? Do all of that and don't act like a big company and personal company. Throughout my career, the recruiters who've done that caught my attention. I didn't always go with their proposition, but they definitely caught my attention and I spent time with them.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing so far is that the personal touch and the relationships are really key to small businesses winning that talent over the larger organizations.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. So, one thing that has always stuck with me is that organizations who fail to change because they think that their practices and processes are tried and true, they eventually get left behind. And we've seen this with so many businesses. So how can organizations reassess their strategies when those previously successful tactics may no longer be attracting talent?
Yeah, great question. So I'll start with HR strategy follows business strategy. And so the first determination, if you're the chief people officer there, is to say, is this a business strategy or HR strategy? Where is the friction? And then I'll say it's incredibly difficult to look at yourself in the mirror and think about yourself differently than you did yesterday. So just have that humility and awareness. So if your strategy and tactics are no longer working because you're looking at these set of metrics, What you probably should do is get some outside in perspective from candidates who said yes, from candidates who said no, and then importantly, go talk to those recruiters who are beating you. Take them out for lunch.
Yeah.
And you'll be surprised how willing they are to share how they beat you. I've had some of those. They were very happy to tell me how they beat me.
Okay, so you have done this before.
Absolutely.
Well, that's wonderful news. Yeah, we can definitely learn so much from our competition. And I think that's really important as well is, understanding what your competition looks like. You talked about how HR strategy and business strategy are following each other. Is it possible that they can be one and the same?
They should complement each other. The spirit of what you're saying, yes. Technically, not really, because the business strategy might be we're going to increase our market share from 32% to 38% and expand our margins from 22 to 25%, right? The people strategy supports that and is typically not expressed in terms of margins or market share. So what you mean, the intent of what you're saying, absolutely. Technically, it's slightly different.
Yeah, yeah. And Min, I just want to call this out really quickly. Someone in the comments has said that they love your Cat in the Hat mug. So
Oh, thank you. I took my nieces to Universal Studios and picked this up years ago.
I love that. I love it. It's so fun. All right. So let's move on to our next subject here and talk about how we can actually compete for that talent. We've already talked about and identified some of those key components that make smaller organizations have the upper hand when it comes to larger organizations. But over the last 2 years, like you were talking about, Min, smaller organizations have really struggled, whether they've had to close down their doors due to the pandemic, or furlough or lay off their employees, or whether they've had to change their business practices or hours of operations. It's definitely been a struggle, and not just for small organizations, but all businesses alike as we navigate through the pandemic. But you work for organizations like Amazon Web Services, Stanley Black Decker, General Electric, and JP Morgan Chase. So how would you advise them?
So at Amazon, I knew how to compete against Google and Microsoft. Sometimes they'll win because sometimes it's a crazy bidding war, but I knew how to compete against them. The startup space was kicking my ass, okay? At JP Morgan, I could win against Citi and Bank of America all day long. It was the private equity shops that were kicking my ass. And so you see the themes there. It was the smaller, agile entities that were snipers that just irked me. It was the hardest to compete against. So my advice for the small and business sized companies is play to your strengths, be a recruiting sniper.
Be a recruiting sniper. Yeah, I love that. And that goes exactly back to that study that Sherm did, is that agility is the key component for recruitment and retention. So have you noticed that there's a difference in the level of agility between small organizations and those large organizations?
Yes, it's starting to converge a little bit. So small companies that know they're small and continue to act agile tend to fare better. I know the headline is we can't pay as much, but I think that obfuscates the real issues. Small companies that think that are small, but compete on the terms of the Goliaths, brute force, don't do very well. And again, there are a handful of big companies that are breaking up their assembly line of recruiters and saying, we're going to be snipers too, because at some point it's very difficult just being the highest bidder.
Right. Yeah. So let's head back into the topic of David versus Goliath here. In the story of David versus Goliath, David actually had 5 stones that he, picked up to take down the giant. So when it comes to recruitment and retention for these small organizations, Min, what would you say those 5 stones are when it comes to competing for talent?
Great metaphor. So I'd say the first stone, play to your strengths and love that you're not big. You just got to have that small company swagger. I have talked to recruiters that felt insecure about their value proposition, and that comes through. It's hard to convince top talent to come if you're not convinced. So stone number one, play to your strengths, love that you're not big, show it in your swagger. Stone number two, I would say, and we're getting thematic here, provide a personal recruiting experience. Pretend you're recruiting your cousin, not a stranger you found on LinkedIn. Talk to them like they are your cousin and see what happens. And three, and we touched upon this earlier as well, tell the story of why that specific person should join the company. There's power in details, so be very specific. And so Brianna, if you want, let's role play. Let's pretend I'm recruiting you from Verified First, right? What I know is that you apparently got a great boss. You love your company culture. They're giving you a big job. They're giving you experiences, okay? And so I'm at a bigger company. I would need to brute force over brute force. Just give you an offer that's just overwhelms those emotions. No, 70% increase, 80% increase, or I have to tell a story about how we're going to help you take that next step. Or I'll just wait for the time that you're unhappy and then I'll tell my story.
Yeah, those are all definitely very great considerations for when it comes to that brute force for trying to win those candidates over, for sure. I would say for me, the biggest thing that is important, I think specifically to my generation, and that something that has, as I follow these recruiters, something they say that comes up quite a lot in these interviews is, how can my place in your organization, how can I continue to grow and advance? And, I've been seeing an increase in these questions being asked. So your second opportunity to me seems to really align with at least my personal needs in terms of providing that experience for learning and growth, especially at my current age and development in my company. But I think that those are great propositions there as well.
Yeah, and as you progress in your career, Brianna, your life cycle changes. So things that are important to you wane, and then the pixie ducks that they've got you on right now wears off a little bit. And so again, being a recruiting sniper, you kind of look at the psychographic and where they are in their lives. That's why I say, listen, get to know the person, and then you'll know what works.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback here. And Min, apologies. Did we make it through all 5 of them there?
Five.
All 5 of the pebbles here. I was so consumed with what you were talking about that I totally forgot count of where we're at right now.
I thought you gave me 3 pebbles. No worry. We threw dirt in Goliath's eyes and we just brought him down in 3 pebbles.
Yeah, so the second one that you mentioned actually was that personal recruiting touch. And that's actually something, again, we talked about with Prestige Care in our episode back in April. And he specializes in the recruitment industry. And so he was talking about how you should have someone or yourself apply for one of your own jobs. Like in your case, you're talking about someone's cousin. But some of his biggest suggestions were making sure that your application is no longer than 1 page. Making sure that the process is seamless so that you can get them from, applicant to inquiry to a potential hire. And I think that having that streamlined process right now is so important when it comes to competing for that talent, because, if there's any sort of, bottlenecks in the process, then people are, going to be lured away by something potentially different or better.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm a avid online shopper, and I'd say 15% of my transactions that I get to the shopping cart and I'm ready to check out, I walk away from because they ask one too many questions. And so that applies with candidates as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That is very, very fair. Now, we've talked a lot about the upper hands of smaller and larger organizations, but it's very clear that smaller organizations might just not have the resources to compete, whether that's time, labor, money, whatever it may be. So what are those unique ways that smaller organizations can implement and promote awareness of those non-cash rewards to attract talent?
Yeah, I think it's word of mouth. And so if you're in a small to medium sized company and funding is a little limited, um, I think first make hiring the job of everyone in the company. Then set aside a little money. It doesn't take, I'm not talking about millions or even hundreds of thousands. Set up a little bit of money for a lot of social recruiting. And I don't mean social media. I mean, go to physical places where talent hangs out. The conversion rate at a bar is a whole lot higher than LinkedIn or Indeed. And so if you've got a limited budget, you can't do advertising, you're not a well-known brand, no one's going to go to a website because they don't think of the name of your company. Then go where they hang out. Buy some drinks. It doesn't have to be alcoholic, don't get me wrong. Set up some happy hours. I had a friend that got a job because a company set up a happy hour. And when you do that, you skip the top part of the recruiting funnel where the big companies are actually better. And you play in your space and then you tell the story.
Yeah.
So I think social recruiting, physical social recruiting.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely key in meeting candidates where they're at, especially when they might be passive candidates as well. And, your example of coming in maybe with brute force, maybe you're not the large Goliath-like organization, but you are coming in to show them, what the grass looks like on the other side. So that is definitely important as well. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the tools and strategies to win. So what advice would you have, or what questions should HR and talent acquisition professionals be asking about their strategies to take it to the next level?
How can we get better? Ask this of as many different people as you can. Who's saying no to us? And understand that psychographic.
Yeah. And I love that you've brought up psychographics as well, because there's so much that I've learned from you today about that component, in that, you're following the actual employee's life cycle as well, and understanding where they're at in their current life to be able to be ready for that position. Now, this next question here, we're not necessarily looking for promotion of product solutions at all, but I think one of the key components in talent acquisition and recruitment is that technology factor. It streamlines the hiring process, it automates things, and allows time ultimately for those value-added initiatives. So these HR and talent acquisition professionals can actually focus on all the things that we're talking about today. So when it comes to these smaller organizations, what type of technology, do you think they should adopt or implement to be able to recruit against those big Goliath-like companies?
Yeah, so great question. So here's kind of a hidden truth, right? I've met a lot of recruiting leaders at a lot of company, and I'll say there's a very weak correlation between their hiring success and the sexiness of their technology. A very weak correlation. What you find in the Goliaths or the big corporate world is that the technology is important to communicate up. It's important to do data reports better and faster. So I get hit up almost every week by a new startup promising to use AI or some proprietary technology to find talent. Time will tell if there's substance there, but here's a fact that might surprise you, Brianna. I don't really need help finding talent. It's a myth. None of us do. To say you can't find talent means you don't know where they are. We know where they are. We know where they work. I can get a list of 10,000 marketing professionals in a matter of seconds. When people say I can't find talent, they're really saying, I don't know how to pick and I don't know how to get them to come over here. That's what they're really saying. So the hard work is in persuasion. The best recruiters know how to listen to what a person really wants and then talk about it. The perfect vendor, and hopefully one of your sponsors is one of these, is, again, I don't need help finding talent, is one that can help me have an AI-based battle card and psychographics on candidates. And that's something that I think will be game changing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, tech is important, but it is not, it's not necessarily the end all be all. Organizations can be truly successful without it, but it definitely does help in some areas. I worked for an organization in my last position as an HR assistant, and we were probably hiring maybe 300 people yearly, and we were operating off of spreadsheets. And when it comes to competing for talent, that can be a huge, disadvantage in terms of the time to fill and, the compliance factors as well. So, technology in the terms of, it's a means to an end, but not necessarily the end all be all.
Yeah. Now, another place where it's worth investing in technology, Brianna, is to improve the hiring decision. When you think about bias and then all that stuff, we in our progressive world, we just need to fight. That's where technology can hurt or help.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love that you brought that up as well, because, it can really provide us, kind of that guide in terms of where we take an organization in terms of talent. Now, we have had a wonderful discussion today. I've learned so much from you. You've had such amazing wisdom and insight into what's going on. So, what would you say is the number one thing that small businesses today should take from this conversation?
You can beat the Goliaths. And a generational shift plays even more to your strengths if you just recognize it. The new workforce wants a human experience. They want a place they can belong, and they want flexibility. Tell your story.
Yeah, I love that. And you talked about the general shifts as well. And we do have a question from Brooke also. And, she wants to understand the difference in generational candidates and, what exactly they value when it comes to looking at opportunities for different organizations.
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I have cognitive conflict when I talk about generations because number one, it tends to be U.S. centric, and it tends to broad brush people. So we'll start macro and then we'll get to the details. On a macro basis, you tend when I was when I was growing up in the corporate world, training was everything. I needed to join G and I said, teach me, I'll work for free, just teach me. This was in the 20th century. Now knowledge is so democratized that young early career talent can learn so much faster and is not dependent on an employer, a patriarch, spoon feeding training to them. So what they care, and they're more confident, especially in this economy. So they demand things like flexibility, a sense of belonging, work-life balance. So you see more of that. However, to Brooke, I would say, depending on the size of your company, those macro trends may not matter. You just need to know what type of personality you need to be successful in your business. And there's enough of that in every generation that you can pick off like a sniper.
Right. It goes back to those psychographics here.
Yeah.
Now, throughout all of this conversation today, I want to know, is this something that HR and talent acquisition professionals alone can accomplish, or is there other buy-in that's needed from the organization when it comes to those recruitment and retention methods?
Oh, absolutely not. HR cannot do it alone, because if recruiting says all the right things and then you hand the candidate off to a hiring manager for an interview and it goes the other way, if it's not genuine, you lose the candidate. So this is about being authentic to what your company culture is and putting that your best foot forward, but in a coordinated fashion. We absolutely cannot do it alone.
Yeah, exactly. We had a conversation with Chris Corneen from MSI, and we talked about the alignment between HR and the CEO and how, if HR is not aligned with the business initiatives, then whatever they are attempting to do is going to be written off because it doesn't align with the mission of the organization. So I think that it's so important not only to get buy-in from executive leaders, but then also when it comes to retention too. We talked about that positive workplace culture and getting buy-in from your employees as well. Our HR team, they actually produce a PowerPoint presentation of all of the newest people we've been able to bring onto the company. And they ask them what their favorite thing about Verified First is. And every single one of them out of, the 50 new hires we've gotten are saying things like, I love this company. It really makes me feel welcomed. I feel supportive. I love how awesome people are. And I think that's key there. And, finding that buy-in from your employees, and then also having the executives of the organization level it up and contribute to that message as well. So
you work in an awesome culture. I'll put Verified First as on the list of places we need to hire from.
All right. I love that. Well, I love to hear it, Minh. We have had an amazing conversation today, but it looks like we are coming up on our time. I could talk to you all day about this kind of stuff, but I know there's many questions in the chat here and we weren't able to get to all of them, but we have the contact information here. If you're interested in learning more from Minh, he has provided his LinkedIn, so feel free to follow him, message him on there. And then also we have our contact information for Verified First. Now, I want to give another huge shout out to iCIMS for sponsoring this event today, and then for Minh as well for providing all your wonderful insight into today's conversation. I truly hope that everyone here has been able to learn something about how the Davids can beat the Goliaths. Now, I did talk about that Sherman HRCI credit in the beginning of today's conversation. So if you are interested in snagging that credit for any of our live attendees today, stick around just a little bit longer and we'll have a post-webinar survey you can take with information on how to redeem credit there. And then for any of our on-demand listeners, you will receive information in your email for getting that credit as well. Now with that, Minh, I want to thank you again for an amazing conversation today. Do you have any last thoughts at all?
Well, it's a pleasure being here, and I'm happy to help anyone who reaches out. Thank you, and it's been a pleasure working with you, Brianna.
You as well, Minh. All right, well, with that, I bid you an amazing rest of the day. Thank you, everyone, for attending today, and I hope you have an amazing week.